It was 1997, and Los Angeles was rocked by a crime almost too bold to be real. Under the cover of darkness, 5 masked men stormed the Dunbar armored truck depot, tied up the few guards on duty, and vanished into the night with nearly $19 million in cash. At the time, it was the largest cash robbery in US history. The heist was planned from the inside. The thieves even had the help of a former depot employee. And for years, it remained unsolved. But as the saying goes, even the most meticulous crime can unravel from a single mistake. What happened next turned this notorious heist into a story of determined investigators and justice finally served. The robbery was masterminded by Alan Pace III, a former security officer at the Dunbar facility. Pace knew the depot's layout and operations better than anyone, its floor plans, camera locations, and even the vault keys, because it was his job to oversee safety there. When he was suddenly fired just one day before the heist for a minor infraction, Pace put into motion the scheme he had long been planning. He recruited 4 other men, all off-duty security guards, to help him execute the plan. Those men, co-conspirators named Thomas Johnson, Freddie McCrary, Terry Brown Sr., and Eric Boyd, had no idea of the magnitude of what they were about to do. The crew needed an airtight alibi and the right equipment. On the evening of September 12, 1997, all 5 attended a party in Long Beach to establish their cover. When the party ended, they slipped away quietly. Dressed in all-black tactical gear with ski masks, they armed themselves with radio headsets, handguns, and a shotgun. Crucially, Alan Pace still had a working key to the depot's side door, a key he had kept from his days on the job. With this key in hand, the team was ready to hit the depot at midnight. When the clock struck midnight, the plan went into action. The men entered through a side door of the Dunbar depot, using Pace's key to avoid triggering alarms. Inside, they found only a couple of guards on duty. The robbers burst into the counting room and forced everyone to the floor, binding their hands and feet with duct tape. Although they were heavily armed, no shots were fired. The guards were merely terrified and helpless. With the guards secured, Alan Pace led the team to the vault area. Using heavy bolt cutters, the thieves shattered padlocks on the cash cages. Inside the cages were pallets of crisp $20 bills, destined for ATMs throughout Los Angeles. The robbers hauled the money into metal carts, filling them to the brim. Next, they dumped the cash into waiting U-Haul trucks, one of which had been rented earlier in the day for precisely this purpose. Before making their escape, the men destroyed all evidence they could. They smashed the surveillance cameras and seized the videotapes, an act made easy by Pace's intimate knowledge of the system. Then, in almost cinematic fashion, they quietly walked out of the depot. Leaving their U-Haul loaded with cash, they drove to a safe house, changed into clean clothes, and calmly returned to the very party where their friends were still celebrating. As far as the city knew, nothing had happened. It would be a shock when word of the robbery finally broke in the morning. 12 a.m. Using Pace's key, the thieves quietly enter the depot through a side door. Midnight, they subdue the guards on duty, forcing them to lie face down and tying them with duct tape. Shortly after, with weapons ready, Pace's team hits the vault area, cutting padlocks and pushing out almost $19 million in cash. The money is loaded into carts and then a U-Haul truck outside. Before leaving, the robbers smash security cameras and take the tapes, then disguise themselves and slip away back into the night. For a time, it looked like the heist had been perfect. The robbers had vanished, the money was in the U-Haul, and no alarms had tripped. But investigators refused to believe in the idea of a truly perfect crime. When police carefully searched the depot, they found one small clue: a broken red taillight lens on the loading dock. The lens didn't match any of Dunbar's armored cars. Scientists at an FBI lab eventually realized it came from a common 14-foot U-Haul truck. Using that clue, detectives tracked down who had rented such a U-Haul around Sept. Now 12. The trail led them to Eugene Lamar Hill Jr., who had rented a matching truck the day before the robbery and returned it the next day. When officers interviewed Hill in 1999, he panicked. In his possession were stacks of cash wrapped in the distinctive paper bands that had been used on the stolen bills. Confronted with the evidence, Hill broke down and confessed. He named his friends as fellow robbers, finally giving police the long-sought connections. Investigators then rounded up the rest of the gang. Hill's admission gave them enough leads to arrest the others. In total, all 5 robbers were eventually caught. A dramatic, months-long investigation, codenamed Operation Dunbar, had finally exposed the culprits. A broken taillight lens at the crime scene, traced by the FBI to a rented U-Haul truck. Investigators traced that truck rental to Eugene Hill, whose fingerprints and rental records matched the timeline. Hill was found carrying bundles of cash with sequential serial number wrappers, unmistakably from the Dunbar heist. Hill quickly confessed under questioning and identified Alan Pace, Eric Boyd, and the others as his accomplices. By early 2001, prosecutors had built an airtight case. A federal trial began against the 2 ringleaders, Alan Pace III and Eric Boyd. The other 4 suspects had already pleaded guilty and cooperated with authorities. The evidence, from the U-Haul clue to the seized cash and witness testimony, was overwhelming. After just 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts. Pace and Boyd were formally convicted of the Dunbar Depot robbery. In all, 6 men were charged in the scheme. Ultimately, every one of them was held accountable, either through plea deals or trial convictions. Justice had been done. Even a heist as legendary as this one could not stay hidden forever. At sentencing, U.S. attorneys noted that about $5 million of the loot had been recovered by law enforcement, mostly in assets the robbers had bought, cars, houses, etc. Sadly, however, more than $10 million of the cash still eluded investigators, believed to have been wasted on gambling or even burned, since the $20 bills were sequentially numbered and thus too risky to spend openly. Under federal guidelines, both Pace and Boyd faced sentences of up to 20 years in prison for their roles. The Dunbar armored robbery went down in history not only for the amount stolen, but for how it ended. Law enforcement's persistence turned what seemed like an ingenious crime into a case study in how even small mistakes can unravel a perfect plan. It took years of detective work, but in the end, all 5 robbers were caught and punished. Their story has been retold in books and articles as a cautionary tale. As one source noted, the robbery was planned with the help of a former employee and took years to solve, yet all culprits were ultimately caught, a reminder that there are no truly foolproof crimes. And yet, even in defeat, the robbers earned a grudging respect. An organized crime expert once remarked that pulling off such a heist almost deserved credit for its planning, even though the criminals eventually paid the price. In the end, the story became a triumph for justice, a meticulous crime foiled by a single overlooked clue and diligent police work. What do you think? Was this clever plan doomed from the start? What tiny clue might the gang have avoided to escape capture? Leave your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow us for more unbelievable crime stories. See you in the next story.